the Art Studios Painting Chat, and today we're discussing the artist Wassily Kandinsky. We're going to talk a little bit about his life, his painting, and also a special ability that he may have had that could have had a major impact on his artwork. But first, let's have a look at what I'm going to do today. I'm going to be using, because we're all about colour, Kandinsky is famous for his use of colour. So I'm not really painting, I'm using oil pastels, but they're heavy on pigment, just about as heavy as you can get. So that's painting in my book. And I'm going to use, for inspiration, one of Kandinsky's paintings, which was a study of concentric circles of colour. So nice little play around, really. So I've taped down some paper to the board here. I've drawn out 12 boxes, and we're going to put just colours into each in concentric circles, perhaps inspired by the way Kandinsky may have done it. So Kandinsky, he was born in 1866 and he died in 1944, and he was active as a painter quite a lot later in life, sort of when he was 30 years old, and his first painting that's sort of recorded on WikiArt is in 1898 of a sort of ship done in a very sort of traditional and academic style. And he moved from Russia to Germany and he studied painting at the Munich Academy of Fine Arts. So he was active in Germany, and he became very interested ultimately in colour and its relationship to how we feel and how that might relate to painting. So after working at sort of the Munich Academy of Arts and studying there, he moved back to Russia for a bit, where he started the Museum of Culture and Painting with some friends, some sort of insiders in Russian sort of high society or whatever. And they started this museum of sort of culture and painting, but as seen pretty much from Kandinsky's point of view, which in Russia at that time was probably not the sort of more materialist, very sort of day-to-day real sort of way that a lot of Russian society was thinking. So ultimately he sort of made his way back to Germany and Bavaria, where he studied at the Bauhaus school. Now we've all heard of Bauhaus. Maybe one day I'll talk a bit more about Bauhaus. That was closed down by the Nazis eventually, prior to World War II, because the Nazis were not big fans of the kind of art that Kandinsky and people like Picasso, again, were proponents of. So Kandinsky started off quite in a sort of reasonably ordinary, traditional way, but then quickly moved away from that and went into Fauvism, which we've discussed before. So the wild beasts, as they call themselves, the Fauvists. Beautiful yellow here. I clean it off on a bit of tissue paper because you get dust all over it. So he started off as a Fauvist, and they sort of used colour unrealistically, but to represent emotion and how they felt, which was a bit more one step further from Impressionism, which was gaining a sort of an emotional impression of the landscape, but still keeping it pretty real, but sort of loose and free. So he did his Fauvism, and then he kind of pushed on really into Expressionism and abstraction. Now, during all this time, he got married quite early on, I think, and then he had a mistress like many an artist at that time did, who was interested in painting and art. That seems to be a theme amongst the mistresses of male 20th century artists. She was called Gabrielle Monter, and together they'd sort of paint in Bavaria, and he started a movement with her and some other artists. Now, what was this movement called? It was called, I'll do the English, the Blue Riders, and it related to one of his paintings, which is kind of seen as a breakthrough painting for him, in which he drew a rider dressed in blue on a horse, but it wasn't a particularly realistic horse or rider, and it used more blocks of colour, and there was a sort of blue foreground and shadow on the horse and a blue mountains, and it's more about how the colours related to each other. So that's when abstraction and colour started to feature more in his work. He was also interested in something called, and I want to discuss this a bit more one day, theosophy, which was a sort of, not really a religion, but a theory of how everything came to be from a lady called Madame Blavatsky. And that sort of related to everything being spawned from one point and geometrically coming out the universe, I guess. Don't know a great deal about it, so it'd be interesting to look at that some more one day. And yeah, so I was interested in that, and very much writing books and the academic side of art, but running in parallel to all this. And when he mentions it in his book called Concerning the Spiritual in Art, he talks about hearing music by Wagner. Is that Rise of the Valkyries? I think it is. And he was talking about how he was moved so much by the music that he saw colours. And also talked about how colours had sounds and sounds had colours. Now at the time, I'm not sure a great deal was known about what this is now considered to be. A condition, is it a condition? I don't know, called synaesthesia. Synaesthesia. Let's get it right together. Synaesthesia. And there's different types of synaesthesia, and it's when the senses cross-talk to one another. So you might have, you might be able to taste words, or words might produce tastes. You might be able to feel sounds, or in Kandinsky's case, you might be able to see sounds through colours, different kinds of colours, or vice versa. Not only might, the sounds might create colours, but the colours, when you pick them up, might have associated sounds. The most common form of synaesthesia is called grapheme synaesthesia, and that allows you to sort of taste words and sounds. This all sounds like super cool, like superpower. I don't know if people who have this condition or set of experiences have any sort of day-to-day trouble in life, or if it in some way makes life more difficult, but it certainly sounds like something that's very interesting to experience. Anyway, it wasn't really known at the time, but people now look back and wonder if Kandinsky had this condition. And in his case, his synaesthesia is specifically called chromesthesia, because relating to colours triggering sounds. Whoa, the pink pastel's on the move. Yes, so how did this relate to his artwork? Well, you can imagine if I'm picking up a nice bright pink, look at this beautiful pink. If I'm picking that up and it might have a specific sound related to it, or if I hear some music in different colours, in different ways, start to be visually seen by me in the room, I think it's pretty real. Like, it's not like you're just imagining it, you're physically seeing these colours moving around. Then your artwork could become really quite entwined with music, and it did in the case of Kandinsky, to the point where he would call more of his abstract work, if he was doing a quick one, he'd call it an improvisation, and if he was doing a more set out long piece of art, he would call it a symphony. And he was sort of pushing the argument, I suppose, at the time that art could be abstract for this reason. Now, if you think about it, when you listen to music, music can evoke all kinds of emotions in you. And I think it's more easily accepted that music, which in itself is kind of inherently abstract, some sounds and stuff like that, making you feel something. A lot of people with painting still feel that they need to see something. So in The Blue Rider, they would have seen the horse and the rider, and they go, oh, that's a beautifully painted horse or beautifully painted rider, and look at the skill and how well it's done. And they might not consider that just the colours and the relationship of everything in space might have an emotive effect. And this is where, along with other artists, abstraction sort of came from and started to be driven. So other famous abstract artists are Barbara Hepworth and Henry Moore, things like that. Picasso, of course, as always. And we do see in some of Kandinsky's work maybe a little bit of how a little bit of cubism sneaking in later into the work. And we definitely see in his earlier work signs of impressionism. He was very interested in Monet's haystacks and said how he didn't recognise it as a haystack, but the colour had such amazing impact on him. But he was at first a bit bewildered by why he didn't really see a haystack, if you know what I mean. I've come to see some haystacks. Why is there no haystacks? Right, let's talk about the art for a second here. So I've done all my different colours in the middle, so let's go around and start putting some on the outside, and then I think what I'll do is try and blend these in together. So I've been slacking a bit on the artwork and talking a lot about Kandinsky, which is fine, because the one thing I can do is cut the drawing. I can't really cut the talking. So we're going to put some more concentric circles in. On a note, soft pastel, that's just pure painter's pigment mixed with clay. I kind of think of it as fancy chalk, which it is. I haven't used it a lot. I do love the vibrancy of colours. It's extremely messy in terms of dust, and you'll want something to wipe your pastels down, but it is quite good fun to play around with. And I did think, because we were talking about Kandinsky and colour, that we would get my brightest colours that I have out. So yeah, if we look at his early paintings, they are very much in the Fauvist style, and he did back and forth with bits of things that were recognisable. But what he started to do, maybe in relation to his theosophy, that theory about everything coming from a geometric shapes and spawning from that, maybe some of his paintings have a lot of geometry in them, and they have what almost looks like music on paper, compositions and improvisations, things placed in different places and colours and wisps, making emotions. And maybe they even represent the kinds of wisps and shapes that he was potentially seeing with his synaesthesia. Now, do we know for a fact that he had synaesthesia? I don't think so. I think it's something that people have read in the art history, and knowing what we know now, it's still relatively unknown. I've sort of put back and said, well, this is a good case for somebody who had synaesthesia, and it sort of makes sense that you may well have, let's get some clean tissue, you may well have headed into an artistic career if you had those kind of experiences where music was influencing your artwork in that way so directly. So there are other artists that hypothesize may have had synaesthesia. I hope I'm saying it right. Synaesthesia. David Hockney, a living artist. I haven't looked a lot into the research of how he describes it, but that's definitely mentioned. And also Van Gogh. I've got the English pronunciation there, probably totally wrong. Also, some people think it may have been the case with him, that he had synaesthesia. So it's certainly very interesting that people who are having these experiences may have found art to express themselves. So yeah, he spent a lot of time in Germany and Bavaria painting after he'd come back from Russia, and ultimately moved to France, where, like most artists of that day, you would go, and that's where he died. He had a long career, to say he started at 30 years old. He was a good, like, 40 years worth of paintings, and he's well known all over the world for sort of pioneering abstraction. Now, I do find it quite interesting that he was sort of a contemporary in some ways of Picasso. I haven't looked too much into how they knew each other, if at all. There does seem to be some influence in Kandinsky's work from Picasso around the periods that he was doing Cubism with Georges Braque. So that's kind of interesting. But that sort of filtered through art as a whole at that time, like that whole style went through. But I think a little bit of it did stay in the geometric shapes, but then maybe also Mondrian as well may have come into that a bit later. Yes, so this group, the Blue Riders, they sort of championed the style and thoughts of Kandinsky. And I found this quite interesting that all these little art movements existed. And I have actually started putting together a list of all the different art movements. And I think that's what we're probably going to discuss next video. And then we can go into different ones at times that interest or suit me. But it's certainly interesting how nowadays we don't really have that kind of thing, do we? A little philosophical movements with a few friends where you discuss these kind of things. I've got a lot of pink over this side. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to settle on with my drawing now, come back, summarise Kandinsky, summarise the artwork, and let's see how it looks. Oh, dusty, dusty oil pastels. I know why they often find themselves at the back of the cupboard. Lots of dust, lots of colour. Had good fun though. So, let's take a picture. Did I channel my inner Kandinsky? I was trying to think about colours and music and emotions, but I have to be honest, it was a bit quiet in there today, and there definitely wasn't a lot of music. But I don't know if it's emotional, or maybe I was just trying to get to grips with the medium, the pastel, and make it work. So maybe what I need to do is come back to it and try again. I did enjoy using these actually, and the colours are great, and it is very forgiving in that you can just keep going over it. The only thing is the dust levels are mental. So if you're doing this not in a studio, you know, around the house, you are going to find yourselves having to do quite a bit of clean up. So until I'd researched Kandinsky, I'd not really thought about him much as an artist, and the more and more I look at the art, the more I like it. Some bits more than others. And maybe we'll do a deep dive into some of the actual pieces one day, who knows. I think this has come out quite well, given the time restraint. So there you go. Challenge yourself to do something similar if you want, and channel your inner Wassily Kandinsky. Get Out Studios, Paint and Chat. See you next week.